The question came to me before the pain did, before I felt the sting in my side or tasted the dust in my mouth. It hovered in the air like a prayer unanswered. Dried streaks of crimson along the weathered rails told a story I didn't want to believe was mine. And yet there I was, sprawled against a fence older than my memory, beneath a sky that didn't seem to notice whether I lived or died. The desert was cruel in spring, hot breath by day, bone chill by night. Somewhere behind me, the land still whispered the name Dead Man's Hollow. I'd been running from there for nearly 30 miles, every step soaked in terror and blood. I didn't know where I was anymore, only that I'd collapsed on the edge of a life not my own. That's when I saw him, Thorne Calhoun. He stood 30 feet away, rifle in hand, outlined by the sinking sun like a ghost carved from war and silence. The way he looked at me, it wasn't shock nor mercy. It was calculation, distance, as if deciding whether I was real or just another remnant of the past he'd buried. I was 23 that year. The year was 1879. I still hadn't been kissed. Still slept with a knife under my pillow and a Bible under my bedroll. My mama said a woman's body was a promise and her heart a covenant. I believed her once. Until I saw Cain Barrett murder the DeSoto family, slaughtered like hogs for the silver vein they'd found under their land. I'd gone to town for flour and candles, came back carrying a secret that men would kill for. Barrett wore a badge, Sheriff of Dead Man's Hollow. He smiled while he slit their throats. His men watched. One of them laughed, and I ran. My side was torn, my dress ruined, and still I ran past prickly pear and dry riverbeds, past coyote tracks and buzzard shadows. I ran until my legs gave out and the sky turned copper. Until I reached that fence and that man and that gun. He didn't move for a long while, just watched me bruised, bleeding, a stranger staining his sanctuary. "I can keep going," I whispered, though I could barely breathe. "Just point me toward water." He stepped forward, then slowly, deliberately. The rifle stayed low but ready. Up close, his face was carved from hard years. Scars ran across one brow like forgotten lightning. His eyes were a color I couldn't name, only feel like ash stirred after fire. "What happened?" he asked, his voice like gravel under boot. "They're coming," I said. "Men from Dead Man's Hollow. 4 of them. Sheriff Barrett, he's not what he pretends to be." He studied me like a man reading a message etched in bone. "You do something to earn them chasing you?" he asked. I almost laughed, almost wept. "I saw," I said. "That's all. I saw what they did to the DeSotos, what they did to that little girl Sarah. She was 8, and now they're hunting me." The name Sarah hung between us like a child's ghost. He looked past me toward the horizon where the wind painted dust trails in the dusk. "You got a name?" he asked. "Mercy," I said. "Mercy Lark." He blinked, and something in him shifted. "Figures," he muttered. Then he bent down and lifted me like I weighed less than his regrets. My head rested against his chest, and I smelled smoked cedar and old gunpowder. I didn't fight him. I didn't have strength left for pride. Inside, the house was clean but quiet. No photographs, no clutter, just wood iron and silence. He opened a trap door beneath the hearth. A root cellar. Dry air rose up like a buried secret. "You'll stay here," he said. No sound, no movement, no matter what you hear. He helped me down, slow and careful. The shelves were stocked canned peaches, dried venison, kerosene, bandages, and morphine tucked beside bullets and salt. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, gripping his arm. You don't know me. You don't even know if I'm telling the truth. He looked down at me, and in his gaze, I saw something raw. Maybe I've seen that look before in my own reflection. Years back. Right after I stopped believing anyone would help me either. He closed the trap door and laid the rug across it, muffling the world above. Then he walked away. And I waited. In the dark, listening to the hoofbeats arrive like judgment. Above me, the sound of boots on the porch. Then a voice smooth, familiar, venomous. Evenin', Mr. Calhoun. Name's Kane Barrett. We're looking for a girl. Bleeding, scared, dangerous. Come through here. My heart stopped, but my story had already begun. The cellar smelled of dry, earth-rusted nails and old sorrow. Dust clung to my tongue like ash. Every heartbeat echoed in my ribs like a distant drum. Above me, the floor groaned, not with age, but with the weight of decision. Thorne Calhoun stood between me and death had a name. Kane Barrett. I haven't seen a soul in weeks, Thorne said, his voice low, calm, almost lazy. A poker player masking a losing hand. Barrett's reply came sharp as a spur. We followed blood to your fence, Calhoun, still damp in the dirt. You telling me that came from a rabbit? I gripped the revolver Thorne had left in the cellar. My fingers trembled, not from fear alone, but from the fever growing in my wounded side. The bleeding hadn't stopped. My strength was slipping, but my will sharpened with every boot step above me. Silence. A footstep. Another. Thorne spoke again. Coyote, most likely. Or maybe a cougar. They roam this way sometimes. Left claw marks on my barn door last week. You mind if we take a look? Barrett said. But it wasn't a question. Their boots scattered dust as they dismounted. I imagined the porch boards creaking beneath their weight. I pictured Barrett's men spreading out, one toward the barn, another toward the corral, the third lingering just outside the door. I'd seen this choreography before. It was a dance that ended in blood. Barrett was inside now. I could feel him. His voice was closer coated in arrogance and heat. Nice place you got. Quiet. A man could live out his whole life out here and never be bothered, or hide a body or two without anyone noticing. Thorne didn't answer. Funny thing. Barrett continued walking slowly across the wooden floor, his spurs clicking like teeth. You vanished from the world after the Rio Claro affair. They said you were dead. Guess they were only half right. So Barrett knew who Thorne was. That meant this wasn't just a hunt. It was a reckoning. I'm not hiding anyone, Thorne said evenly. I live alone. I prefer it. Barrett chuckled a dry, humorless sound. Don't we all? The cellar boards above me creaked. My breath caught. The revolver in my hand felt heavier now. I pressed myself into the shadows between crates of salted pork and bags of flour, praying the old wood would keep its secrets a while longer. Then came the voice of one of Barrett's men shouting from the barn. Fresh tracks, Kane. Hoof prints. And they ain't from cattle. Thorne responded before Barrett could twist the silence. I rode out this morning. Fence post snapped in the north line. Probably the same critter that left the blood. Another pause. Then Barrett's voice again, softer now, like a snake in dry grass. You sure there ain't anyone else here? Thorne didn't reply right away. In that silence, I counted the beats of my heart, 6, 7, 8, and then the creak. The old trap door above me shifted ever so slightly. Not open. Just a shiver in the timber like the house itself had exhaled. Barrett must have heard it too. Footsteps approached the hearth. I closed my eyes, pressing my lips to the revolver's cool barrel. If he opened that door, I'd shoot. I'd aim for his eyes. But I'd never get the second shot off. I knew that, and then salvation came in the form of panic. "Kane," a young voice rang out from the yard, hoarse and breathless. "We got trouble. Sheriff Moreno's asking questions in Hollow. Someone told him about the DeSoto claim." Barrett cursed loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Outside, hooves pawed the ground. Saddles creaked. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of sweat and raw urgency. "What kind of questions?" Barrett barked. "The kind that end with a rope," the boy said. "We need to ride. Now." For a heartbeat, I believed it was over. But Barrett wasn't a man who left things undone. I heard his boots cross the floor again. Closer. Closer. Then he stopped. "Just above me." He spoke in a low growl. "You got secrets here, Calhoun. I can smell them in the walls." "You smell your own fear," Thorne replied. Silence. Then the sound of a revolver holstered. "Well, be back," Barrett said. "And next time I ain't knocking." Their horses thundered into the distance. Only when the sound faded did I let the revolver drop from my grip. My hand was slick with sweat and blood. The trapdoor opened gently. Thorne looked down at me. His face was stone, but his eyes had fire. "You still want to run?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." The morning after the fire wasn't quiet. It was hollow. Ash floated like snow through a sky too soft for what had happened. I stood barefoot on what used to be our kitchen floor, now just charred wood and blackened nails. Smoke still curled from the barn ruins where Thorne had dragged me out hours before bleeding and half unconscious. I should have been dead. But I wasn't, and neither was Thorne. He leaned against the corral fence, binding his forearm with a strip of linen he'd torn from his shirt. His jaw was clenched tight, eyes on the horizon like he was waiting for something to come, or perhaps daring it to. I had never seen a man look more ready to die standing up. "Where's Barrett?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Gone," he said. "Not far, but gone. For now." I swallowed hard. "He'll be back." He nodded. "That's why I didn't chase him. He ain't done. Men like him never are." His words chilled me more than the morning wind. The truth was, Kane Barrett didn't just want me. He wanted silence. He wanted every trace of Sarah and me scrubbed from this county like chalk off a blackboard. And now that I'd lived, I was louder than ever. Thorne turned toward me. "We need to leave Mercy." "No," I said, surprising even myself. "If we leave, everything dies here for nothing. Sarah dies again. I die again." He stepped forward, jaw still set. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't buried more than I care to count?" I looked up at him, wounded, but unafraid. "Then help me do what you couldn't do for them." We locked eyes. His hardened expression cracked just slightly enough to let truth leak through. "All right," he said at last, "but we'll need allies." He wasn't wrong. So we rode through canyons and whispering fields to the few who'd once worn the badge for more than power. One of them was Eliza Hart, the widow of a sheriff and a midwife to half the frontier. She opened her door before we even knocked, rifle in hand and eyes sharp. "Figured you'd come," she said, stepping aside. She dressed my wounds in silence, then without being asked, pulled a folded telegram from her apron. "Barrett's due in Carson City tomorrow. County seat trial, all smoke, no justice. You got one shot." "What about Morrison?" Thorne asked. "He's still the circuit judge." Eliza's eyes darkened. "He's got a conscience. But he's alone." "Then not anymore," I said. We rode again, harder this time. through dusk and thunderclouds. I remember thinking, I am no longer hiding. That night, we reached the old church where Morrison often held court when the courthouse overflowed. It was quiet except for the sounds of chairs being dragged and paper shuffling. Justice always seemed to whisper before it roared. Morrison looked older than I remembered, eyes sunken but kind. He didn't smile when he saw us, just stared a long while like seeing the dead rise. "Mr. Calhoun," he said, voice tired. "And you must be Mercy Lark." "I am," I replied, "and I have a story to tell." He motioned to the pews, but I didn't sit. I stood tall, even as the pain in my ribs ached. "I have one question, Judge Morrison. If I speak, will anyone listen?" His eyes softened. "Depends if you're ready to make them." The next morning, the town buzzed like flies on a fresh carcass. Barrett was back dressed in clean clothes and smug smiles, flanked by two of his men and the town clerk who'd long been in his pocket. The hearing was a formality everyone knew. Barrett had dirt on too many folks' secrets wrapped in silk and the kind of money that could buy silence in a thunderstorm. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Thorne stood beside me outside the chapel courthouse. He didn't speak, just placed a small silver ring in my palm. "I was going to sell it for bullets," he said, "but I figured you might use it for truth." It was his mother's. I'd seen him thumb it like a talisman in moments of doubt. I closed my fingers around it. "You keep your bullets," I said. I've got my voice. Inside, the crowd was restless, 50 or more. Some I knew. Some who'd looked away when we begged for help. A few I used to call neighbors. And yet, when I stood to testify, they went still. Not because I was beautiful, though my mama always said I had a poet's face, but because I didn't tremble. Not this time. I told them about Sarah, about the threats, the silence, the fire, about how we begged for help and no one came, about the man Kane Barrett really was. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just spoke like a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything left to honor. When I finished, no one clapped. But no one coughed either. Even Barrett looked shaken just for a moment. Then the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Barrett, do you wish to speak?" But Kane said nothing. He only glared, not at me, but at Thorne. And in that glare, I saw fear. Because for the first time, we were louder than him. I never knew fire could whisper. It had screamed the night our ranch burned, devouring wood, memory, and blood. But now, in the quiet aftermath, it only crackled low among the ruins, as if ashamed of what it had taken. Ash clung to everything. My dress, my hair, the soles of my feet. But I didn't brush it away. Ash was proof I'd survived, and that Sarah had not. It felt wrong to be clean when she no longer could. The wind shifted, stirring a few loose embers and the faint scent of scorched pine. I stood on the edge of the porch, or what remained of it. The boards creaked, unsure whether they still had purpose. Like me. Thorne was by the water trough, sleeves rolled, rinsing blood from his forearms. Not all of it his. Not all of it avoidable. We hadn't spoken much since the shootout. What do you say to a man who killed for you, bled for you, then held you like something breakable? Afterward, I sat on the steps, wrapping Sarah's shawl tighter around me. It smelled of wood smoke and wild lavender. She'd worn it the night before she died. A part of me was afraid if I held onto it long enough, she might come back. Another part feared she never truly left, just stayed quiet in my chest. A crunch of boots. Thorne stood beside me now. Not too close, not far either. "You should rest," he said. "So should you," I replied. We sat in silence, watching the sun claw its way into the sky, like it too was recovering from a long night. "I never thought I'd come back here," he said, eventually, eyes scanning the distance. "Least of all like this." "You came back a different man," I said. That matters. He looked at me, then truly looked not the way men do when they want something, but how soldiers might look at another who survived the same battle. Not as a woman, as a witness. I came back a coward, he said, but I stayed for you. I didn't answer, not because I disagreed, but because it mattered too much. My chest ached with words I wasn't ready to say. So I reached for his hand instead. And for a while, that was enough. Hooves thundered over the ridge. We both rose in an instant instinct still raw. But it wasn't a posse. Not outlaws either. Just Sheriff Morrison and 4 deputies, dust trailing behind them like ghosts they hadn't outrun. Thorne stiffened beside me. "Let me," I whispered. Morrison dismounted before the other's face weathered as any canyon. He removed his hat, approached slow like a man who'd seen too much justice used as a weapon. "Miss Lark," he greeted, voice gravel and steel. "Mr. Calhoun." I nodded. "Sheriff." He took in the scene, the scorched beams, the blood-stained earth, the silence. His eyes didn't linger, but they saw everything. "I've come to set things right," he said. "Kane Barrett's crimes will be tried before the circuit court, and your testimony, both of you, will be needed." My jaw clenched. The thought of returning to Carson City, of facing the same townsfolk who once turned away, felt like reopening a wound. "Will they even listen?" I asked. Morrison looked me dead in the eye. "They'll have to. This time, the dead won't stay buried." He turned to go, then paused. "I failed this county once. I let the wrong men wear the badge and the wrong women carry the scars. But I aim to fix that if I can." I believed him, not because he asked me to, but because I saw the cost of regret in the way his shoulders sagged beneath that star. After they rode off, I stood a long while staring at the trail. The horizon felt closer than it ever had, and yet so did the past. That night, Thorne found me by the fire. "Tell me what you need," he said. I didn't hesitate. I need to speak her name in a room where no one can silence me. I need them to know what they did to Sarah, what they tried to do to me. I need the truth to weigh more than silence. He nodded. "Then we ride together." I looked at him. Ash still smudged on his cheek shirt, torn eyes older than the sky, and knew I was no longer alone in this fight. He didn't save me. Not really. He reminded me I was worth saving. We sat by the fire, knees touching. No promises, no confessions. Just warmth shared in a world that had once tried to take everything. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the letter Sarah had written the night before she died. Her handwriting shaky, but still proud. "Live loud," it said, "even if your voice trembles." The wind picked up again, but this time it felt like breath, not warning. And as the flames danced before us, I whispered into the dark, "I will, Sarah. I will." There's a silence that follows violence, not the stillness of surrender, but the breathless hush of survival. Of choosing to stay when running seemed easier. Days passed, then weeks. The land began to forget. Grass crept up over the burn marks. Birds returned to the rafters of the half-collapsed barn. Even the wind, once shrill and unrelenting, began to sing in softer notes. I walked the ranch at sunrise. That hour between shadow and gold, where nothing lies. I watched the land breathe again, and in that breathing, I felt something new in me stir. Not joy, not quite, but the weight of sorrow lifting like the first time you laugh at a funeral. Thorne spent his mornings in silence, scribbling in a battered notebook, mapping out water lines, trade routes, sometimes sketches of me when he thought I wasn't watching. He'd found a kind of discipline in dreaming. and I had found finally the courage to believe in staying. One morning, I found him at the northern grove where we'd buried the fallen. Kane Barrett, Sarah, and the others whose names still sat sharp on my tongue. His hat was off, hands at his sides. "Do you talk to them?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "They don't answer, but they listen." I stepped beside him. "I dream about her sometimes," I said. "Sarah. She's always walking ahead of me, never turning back. I think she knew I'd find my way if I just kept moving." Thorne looked at me, not with pity, but with recognition. "She led you through a fire," he said. "Now you carry the flame." That afternoon, a rider came. Dusty coat, official seal, a summons. Sheriff Morrison was on trial in Carson City. They wanted our testimony not just to convict a man, but to show a town that silence wasn't the only language of the West. That mercy could stand taller than revenge. That women, too, carried truth worth hearing. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from memory. That courtroom wouldn't be my enemy. But the eyes inside it, the ones that had once watched me break, watched Sarah die, and said nothing they would be. Thorne didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "We ride at dawn." We packed only what mattered: the ledger. Sarah's locket, his journal, and a dress that still smelled faintly of wood smoke. I stood on the porch before we left, running my hand over the new boards we'd hammered in ourselves. The house had scars like us, but it stood. The ride was long, dry, and wide. We spoke little, but I memorized the rhythm of his horse's steps beside mine. At night, we lay under stars. Sometimes, I'd cry without sound, and he'd reach for my hand, not to stop the tears, only to remind me I wasn't alone. On the third day, Carson City rose like a mirage, angular, loud, clean in a way that felt dishonest. We stayed at a boarding house above the courthouse, run by a widow with kind eyes and a firm voice. She served us tea and didn't ask questions, which was the kindest thing anyone could have done. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Wooden benches. A gavel that seemed too small for the weight it carried. I sat on the witness stand, hands clasped in my lap, heart pounding behind my ribs like a wild colt. I spoke. About Barrett, about corruption, about the night the house burned and Sarah bled in my arms. I told them about silence, how it had nearly killed me, how it had cost Sarah everything, and how in the end I had chosen to speak not for justice alone, but to prove that women like us could write history with our own breath. Thorne went next. His words were fewer, but each one hit like a hammer. He spoke of his sins, his cowardice, his return. He didn't ask to be pardoned, only to be heard. By the end, the room was silent, not from judgment, but reverence, like they had remembered something old and true. Morrison was convicted. The DeSoto lands would be audited, and a new marshal appointed. But more than that, we left behind a testimony that felt like a map. For others. For girls like I once was hiding beneath floorboards with a pistol and a prayer. We rode home slower than we came. The ranch welcomed us with wind and dust and lowing cattle. I stepped onto the porch and looked out at the horizon. No ghosts, just sky. That night under the stars, Thorne handed me a small box, inside a ring, silver, weathered, etched with tiny initials I couldn't make out. "I carved it years ago," he said, "back when I thought I'd never use it." My breath caught. "I don't have much," he added, voice low. "But I'd build a whole world with you if you'd let me." I looked at him not as a man who saved me, but as one who stood with me even when I was fire and ruin. Yes, I said. In the morning, we saddled up, rode the fence line together, his shadow beside mine in the rising sun. And for the first time, the trail ahead didn't look like something I had to survive. It looked like home, in the dust and silence of the Wild West. Mercy Lark's story reminds us that strength isn't about how loud you speak. It's about daring to speak when silence is safer. Through betrayal, loss, and fear, she found not just survival, but meaning. And in standing up, she gave voice to those who never could. For those of us over 40 who've lived through our own fires, marriages gone cold, careers, derailed people we trusted, turning their backs, this story isn't just fiction. It's a mirror. Mercy's courage is a call to reflect on what truths we've kept hidden. What injustice have we swallowed because we didn't think anyone would listen? What dreams have we buried under the ashes of disappointment? But here's the gift: it's never too late to choose differently, to be the system shifter, to stand in front of a room full of people, or even just your own reflection, and say, this is what really happened. Because when we do that like Mercy, we don't just change our lives, we rewrite the ending. You've just heard one powerful story, but many more remain untold. Click to discover more raw, gripping, deeply human tales from the Wild West.